Yo, welcome back to the Further Your Lifestyle podcast, conversations on lifestyle, passions, and hustles. My name's Chris Furlong. I am your host, and I'm super excited to be back here having the conversation with you. Episode 69 today, and it's actually, at the time of this episode, it's around one of my most favorite times of the year, and that is mid-year, and it's simply because of these couple of few reasons. It's the end and start of the financial year. Finishing a financial year, to me, it's kind of like, it's a chance to kind of reflect on the progression of my business, or how I've gone with actually earning an income, especially over the last year and a half as I've been working for myself and doing this podcast, starting my own business, and trying to make a living doing it all by myself as a solopreneur. It's really, really exciting, and it's encouraging to be able to see and reflect on that progress. Now, at the same time, we're also starting a new financial year. Here in Australia, we start from July 1st, and that also means I now get to start from zero again. I get a chance to try new things. I get a chance to take all the lessons that I've learned over the last year in business and within the financial year and start to apply them and see if I can hit the ground running. I've got something to compare to. I've got a baseline. I've got now something that I can use and fall back on to see actually how far am I going, or how well am I going. Kind of like a competitive analysis, I guess. But more so, and I think this one is more relevant for everyone that's listening, or anyone that's listening for that case, is we're mid-year through a year. Most of the time, we set our goals, we set our ambitions on a year-on-year basis, for 2022 or 2023 or whatever it may be. At the time of this, it's 2022, and that means we're halfway through the year. So now we have a snapshot of how we've been progressing. How have we been doing? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So yes, you're probably thinking Chris is super hyped about all this. And I'll be honest, I am. I'm really, really excited. And I'm more excited for this year simply because it's my first official end-to-end financial year of me doing my business and operating as a solopreneur. Now, at the same time, I will be very, very honest. Jumping in midway through the year, it's also very nerve-wracking. And yes, I'm very excited, but I'm very open to see where I'm at. And I know that a lot of my goals this year, I'm actually behind on where I should be if I wanted to meet them by the end of this year. But that's why I want to have these conversations, because it's a chance to have a look at where we're going, understand what's happening, see how we're progressing, and actually really understand what's going on. There's so much that we can leverage from doing this analysis, and so much that we can use to help us move forward, realign, and take new steps in the right direction. So, welcome to your mid-year review. So what I want to do in this episode is I want to take you through a series of steps to assess where you are, how you are, and what's next. And don't worry, I won't judge, but neither should you. Don't judge yourself, and don't judge the details that I'm going to take you through either. All I can ask is that you come into this with an open mind. Are you ready? Let's buckle up and rock and roll. So step one is this. Understand where you are. Now, if you are new here, that's okay. You might not have been part of, this process that I've been going through since the start of the year. We went through an understanding of setting goals, aspirations, and things that we wanted to achieve for this year. At the end of the day, this applies for any period of time, but we just did it at the start of the year because that usually makes sense. Regardless if you set some goals or you did not, or you're just jumping in and this is a bit of a curious chat for you, you still need to do a bit of a checkpoint. You still need to understand where are you at with the year and everything that you wanted to achieve. So if you had goals for this year, I need you to take a checkpoint to see, well, how far have you progressed with these so far this year? Maybe you had some intentions. You need to ask yourself, are you actually meeting those intentions? Are they being met? Are you even close to them? You need to really ask yourself that. The other thing is, if you've got any data or anything that you've been tracking to be able to visualize how you've been progressing, now is a perfect time to have a look at it, to actually see where you're at and actually assess what is it telling you. With all this in mind, now that you've got that information, now it's my chance to help you. And I'm going to take you through what I've been doing, what I set for goals, and basically use my data as real life examples that you can get some understanding. And look, it's going to be open, it's going to be real, and that's the whole purpose of this. You need to be open and real with yourself too. So I had 3 core areas that I really wanted to focus on this year. I had a lot more, and I've got lots of other smaller goals and whatnot, but we're going to focus on the 3 core areas because these 3 are king to me. Number 1 is I wanted to hit 10,000 downloads for this podcast by the end of 2022. I wanted to do $60,000 in profit for my business by the end of 2022. And I want to run 2,500 kilometers by the end of 2022, and also do a total of 24 half marathons, averaging 2 per month. So where am I at? Well, truthfully, let's go through it, and I'm going to share with you where I'm at. So for the 10,000 downloads of this podcast, we're halfway through the year. Technically, I should be at 5,000 downloads. Well, I'm currently at 3,149 at the time of recording. In terms of my profit for my business, I'm at 21,200, and that's gross profit at this point. So I'm not really there either, still a bit behind. And from a running perspective, I'm at 718 kilometers in total distance, and I've accomplished 9 half marathons. So how did you go? You've heard mine. How did you go? Did it feel good to look at these, or has it kind of made you think, oh, looking at these, you can already see that maybe you already know the math isn't adding up. You're nowhere near where you need to be. Or maybe you are close to where you need to be. Or maybe you're ahead. Regardless, there's probably a bunch of different emotions going through your mind at the moment. It's okay. Calm down. We're going to go through this and help you understand how do we actually start to take this all in, and how do we actually start to understand it. And that's step 2, actually understanding where you're at. Now that you've seen your mid-year results, now that you've seen the data, you know where you're at, but now we need to really understand where you're really at. And what I mean by this is you need to ask yourself this: do you have anything you can compare this to? And what I mean by this is not someone else, but something such as a prior year's data or a baseline that you've done before. For me, I've done running before. For me, I've done a year of podcasting. For me, I've had a business. I've got stuff that I can compare to. And as I said, you can't be comparing this to someone else, but only your own doing. Now, if you answered yes to this, that's great. But if you answered no to this, that's even better. And we'll start with no first. And the reason why is because if no, you do not have a baseline to compare to, that is likely due to because you've never done this before. Which means you deserve a big congratulations because you are already ahead of where you have ever been before, because you're doing something that you've never done before, which means you deserve to celebrate and give yourself a big pat on the back, because when we don't have a baseline, we're literally starting from zero and you've got nothing to compare to. So anything that you are doing is literally better than what you've done before. So whether you're halfway, whether you're meeting the goal, whether you're not meeting the goal, you are still further than you've ever been, even if it's 1% further. Now, I know you might have been very lazy and you've only done one thing, but the fact is that you are further than you've ever been before. But then the question you can ask yourself about this is, are you happy with this? And we'll touch on that shortly. So just hold that thought. Now, for those that answered yes, yes, you have a baseline. Yes, you've got something that you can compare to of your own personal experience. Well, let's now start to break it down. Let's start to do a bit of comparison to this. In this case, for me, I've got last year's data to compare to. For you, you're going to have to do your own analysis, but I'll take you through the process of what I'm doing. So last year for the podcast, I did a total of 1,531 downloads for, the Further Your Lifestyle podcast. And I did that in a total of 11 months, essentially. Year to date, at this point in time, I've done 1,618 downloads just for this year alone. So let me say that again. 11 months in 2021, I did a total of 1,531 downloads. We're halfway through 2022 and I've done 1,618 downloads. So clearly I am more than double the run rate in terms of progression than I have been from last year. So I'm already winning. No, I'm not near my target, but wow, I'm doing so much better than I was doing last year. And we're going to talk about some of the differences and the gaps and what we do later with that shortly. So just hold that. At the moment, we're going through and understanding, well, how far have we actually come? How are we actually doing? And I'm actually doing really, really well. When I put the baseline, the comparison into play, which is I'm doing double. Like, this is great. Like I'm already done what it took me to do in a year, and I've done it in half the time. The whole point here is now that I've got something to compare it to, I can actually see, I'm actually really doing really well. Let's think about the profit. Let's dive into the profit for the business. As I said, I want to do $60,000 in profit this year for 2022. And at the time of this, I am at 35% with roughly $21,000 in gross profit. This time last year, when I had started my business, I was about 6 months in, I had only done $8,000 in profit. So once again, I'm basically almost 4 times up of where I was in terms of last year, in terms of progression and progress. That is incredible, like 4 times up, 4x. And yes, I've set some ambitious and audacious goals for this year, but once again, once I start to bring in the perspective and the understanding of a comparison to a baseline, I can start to see I'm actually doing so much better. Nowhere near where I need to be, but I'm doing really, really well. So what about the running? Similar situation. And now I've had a lot of battles this year with COVID and being unwell and having to be in isolation and things like that. But currently I'm at 718 kilometers and I've done 9 half marathons. As I said, I wanted to do 2,500 kilometers this year. So not really halfway, am I? Now, if I compare to last year, I had done and 22 kilometers at this point in time, so way further than what I was today. But I'd only done 6 half marathons last year, whereas this time I've done 9 already. So the missing delta, there's some explanation there. I've had to take time off due to COVID, and I've had to be in isolation, and I physically could not run. It's out of my control. It's not because I didn't want to run or I was being lazy. It was unfortunately due to out of my control. So that takes out the bit of the gap, but I'm still behind my goal. However, the half marathon situation, yes, I'm a little behind target as well, once again being out of my control, but I'm so much further than I've done last year, and I didn't have the intention to do this many last year. I had an intention to do 1 every month, but so far so good. I'm actually doing so much better. Once again, those improvements are very relevant and are very clearly there. So if you haven't clicked at this point, we're going to jump into step 3, and that is now understanding the perspective. We have context, we have data, we have results, and we have a baseline to compare it to. Now we can start to understand, okay, so what's the gap? What's the delta? What are the problems that we're dealing with? Why are we not where we want to be or need to be or should be? So though we have or we haven't met our expectations, we are either in positions that are way better, way behind, or kind of where we should be. As I said before, if you've started from 0 and you don't have a baseline, a big, massive pat on the back is deserved to you. So go ahead, pat yourself on the back. But what about the ones that we've missed? What about the ones where we know we could have been further, or know that we should have been further, or you're just not feeling it? You're not comfortable of where you're at. I can use my running and my profit as an example. I can actually use them all as an example. So running here it's been out of my control. The reasons why I haven't been able to run and get up to where I wanted to be is because I was in isolation. I've had COVID come and it's knocked me off my feet for a lot longer than I expected, and I physically cannot run. It would be like if you had an injury. So does that mean I'm a failure? No, it just means that I'm not able to do what I want to do. However, if I had been on a routine and I was deciding to be lazy and didn't want to do it, then it's on me. That's my fault. But at the moment, this is out of my control and I have to just ride that wave. Will I be able to make it up later? We'll see. That's a different conversation. Similar to the profit, but it is different. I am missing my daily targets. I've missed them for about 51 days. I'm about 51 days behind. Yet, I'm 4 times further than where I was last year. I'm 4 times further in terms of actually making a profitable income. So the big question then we need to ask is, was my goal off alignment? Was it too big? Possibly. Or is there room to improve? Which leads me to part 4, room for improvement. And this is where we now start to take everything that we've just discussed and see if we can take something from it to see what we're going to do for the next, 6 months of the year. So now we need to start to work through the steps in part 3 and see if you can identify what were the problems, how can we fix it, what can we be doing. And a way for this that we can do it is a fun little process called Rose, Thorn, Bud. And I've talked about this on the podcast before, but essentially Rose is what has been good, what has worked well. Thorn is what hasn't been working, what isn't going too well. And Bud is, well, what is an opportunity? What is blossoming? What could blossom? So for me, I'll take you through my thinking. You need to do the same for you. When I look at my good, well, based on the information that I have, based on the context, the perspective, and comparing to the baseline, I can see that I'm actually progressing still very, very well. I'm heading in the right direction. I'm not necessarily trending to be overdoing my goals, but I'm definitely not trending to necessarily hit them either. But I am doing better than what I was doing previously. So things are showing some amazing growth. I am struggling with some of the goals. I'll be real about that. I'm behind, but momentum has dropped from that. So that's something that isn't going too well. There's been a few things that have popped up and kind of hit me off the rails, and things that have come up out of my control now mean that I'm behind. So how can I start to adjust that? Which kind of leads me to the opportunity point, the bud. Can I change how I operate my business? Where am I losing out? Why aren't I hitting these targets? Is it stock? Is it sales? Is it marketing? Is it because I have too high of costs? And then the same thinking around the running. Even though it's out of my control, I can't change that, but will I have a chance to make up for it? Can I put a plan in place that when I am back, that I can start to get back on targets? These are all opportunities. These are all things we need to be thinking about and asking ourselves. And we could spend so much time on this, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anyone if they want to have a conversation about it. But this is very, very high level, but I think I'm just doing this to help you get the point that we need to do this analysis to help us, one, get our minds in the right place, to help us actually understand that, just because you're not hitting something, maybe you haven't met the expectation that you set, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough. hey, there's some things that you're probably kicking butt in, right? And you probably feel like a boss, right? And that's good. You should. And at the same time, you should also feel good of the progress you've made. Now, if you had decided to go out and do these things, but you haven't done anything, like you literally have done nothing, well, then of course, you've only got yourself to blame. But if you're out there trying to do what you can do, getting out there, putting the hard work in, you're making progress. Progress is progress. Now, the final thing that I want to take you through is alignment. You need to ask yourself this. If the year stopped today, would you be happy with how far you've progressed? Like, honestly, how are you feeling for this? For me, I would be yes and no. There's some things that I've surprised myself with, especially giving that perspective and context. I can see, wow, I'm doing double the run rate that I was doing for my podcast compared to last year. Not 50%. I'm doing double the run rate. And for the business, I'm 4 times up there where I was last year. Now, the running is probably where things I'm like, maybe I could have been doing a bit more earlier. Or, maybe I shouldn't have, just done a smaller run that day. But they're all things where not necessarily I can change anything now, but they're things in my mind that I know that there's definitely some opportunity there where I could be doing better and I can start to put into play. Especially for the podcast. Yeah, I'm way behind. I'm still ahead, but I know there's a lot more work that I could be doing. So now this is where we can start to identify, we can adjust and align ourselves to more realistic goals and expectations. Do we need to change those goals? Do we need to change those targets? Do we need to adjust them? Maybe. Maybe we just need to change what we're doing, how we are operating, and then charge on. And I'm not going to say what you should do. You need to decide what you will do. And you need to be asking yourself, has anything changed? Does it make sense for me to continue and try and meet these goals? Or have you realized they're not really what you want to focus on and your priorities have changed? That's okay. That is okay. Maybe you've realized they're no longer relevant. Or maybe you still want these goals and you need to figure out how you're going to do it. How are you going to hit these targets? How are you going to hit these goals? Maybe you need to bring them lower. Maybe you need to keep going. Maybe you need to change them altogether. What will you do? Now, at the end of the day, this is the most important thing that you take away from this. Whether you change them, whether you don't, whether you bring them down, maybe you increase them, whatever it may be. As I said at the start, you need to have a baseline to compare to, your own baseline, or your baseline is 0. So you can't be comparing to anyone else. So if you want to change these goals, if you need to bring them down, if you need to increase them, if you need to say, hey, I'm not going to hit this, I need to slow down because things aren't going as planned, that is okay, because you got nothing to prove to anyone but yourself. And I'm saying this very, very openly because I set all my goals very public and, I have to confront them and I have to say, yes, I didn't hit them. But it's not about did I or did I not hit them. It's about the journey there, the things that I'm learning, the understanding, the perspective, the wisdom, the lessons, the conversations, the friendships, the relationships, and the networking that you make along the way. You have no one to compare to other than yourself. And do not compare to other people. I know it's easier said than done, but please, that's why you should track things. That is why you should have a baseline. That's why you should have this information to help keep yourself honest. Use yourself to set the bar and then progress from that. And then you check in. You now get to decide what you're going to do. You now get to decide, are you going to slow down? You get to decide, are you going to speed up? You get to decide if you're just going to keep cruising and make it happen and land where you land. At the end of the day, you are responsible, you are accountable, and it comes back to you. But I think the key message also is, along the way, you need to give yourself some love. You need to reward yourself for making it this far, to the progress that you've made to date. Give yourself a pat on the back. You need to go out and celebrate a small win. Give yourself a reward. And that is the most important thing about this. It's not about that, yeah, you didn't hit your big target, you're a failure. It's about, no, you hit this much, which is so much better than you've ever done before, and you deserve to take a pat on the back. You deserve to reward yourself. Now, you also still need to move on and continue to progress to where you want to be, because the only person that can do that is yourself. Now, remember, it's not about winning everything. It's about winning small things over a long period of time. And we set these goals because we think that's what we're capable of doing. And you probably are. But if you've never done it before, you're going to be learning along the way. It gets easier as you go. Why do you think I've been doing 4 times this year compared to last year with my sales and my profit? It's because I've got so much more experience. And that's the way it works. You build momentum. You get experience. You get understanding. It means you can start to snowball. I've spoken about all these things in so many different episodes. All right, we've got this, all right? I could go on and go on, but the final thing is, we've got this. You've got this. Let's make the second half of 2022, or whatever year this is that you're listening to, your best second half yet. You ready? Let's do it. Now, if you want to chat further about this, or maybe you want to share with me what your win has been for this year, how are you progressing? I would love to hear it. Let me know in the comments below if you are watching on YouTube, or hit me up on Instagram via a DM at Further Your Lifestyle, or you can hit me up on Twitter at Further Your Life, or send me an email, hello@furtheryourlifestyle.com. I would really love to hear from you. I'd really love to have the conversation. And I love hearing people's stories. Maybe you're struggling. Maybe you've listened to this and you're still just not feeling it. Well, let's have a conversation. I want to help you further your life, right? So let's have the conversation. And that could be one thing that you can do to ensure that you are going to have your next best half of a year, because you're going to have a conversation. So it all comes back on you. Take action. Let's do it. You've got this. Really appreciate you being here. You have a wonderful day. Cheers. Now, if you didn't know, we do have the podcast merch, and this is with a key focus of enamel pins. Now, if you haven't checked these out, make sure you do, because the intent of these are really just to be a small token and a reminder for you to charge on, to push on, and to further your lifestyle. Whether it is a gift for someone else to encourage them, or maybe to inspire them, or maybe it's a way to motivate yourself, or you can simply just make a purchase to simply support the podcast, which would be greatly appreciated. We do also have some sweaters and some long tees, so make sure you check it out. Link in the description and in the show notes. Really do appreciate it. Cheers.